Hi everyone, how's it going? James here, welcome to another video. Thank you for tuning in. Got a bit of a lemsip on the go, not feeling too good this morning. Bit of a lurgy going around our family. Yes, good morning, it's Friday and I'm here with a video response for Tommy Burton. Tommy's recent video has given me an excuse or a kind of framework in which to do another video which I've been planning to do for some time, and that is a video on this album. This is Alan Parsons' I, Robot. I'm just going to turn that light off because it's making a rather strange halo effect in the corner. Yes, I, Robot, and I'm going to ask the question, is this the greatest album of the 1970s? And this is a response to Tommy's new video, which is called, I think it's called How Do We Judge Art? So go and watch Tommy's video and then you'll have some understanding of what this one is all about, although I will give you a quick recap. Tommy was just talking about, you know, how do we, when we listen to music, how do we judge what we're hearing, how do we form opinions about it, how do we decide if it's good, whether we like it or not, how much time do we give it, do we give up on it immediately, do we not even listen to it at all, do we spend a lot of time with it because we suspect there's something there even if we don't immediately like it. So that was Tommy. Now, this idea is a response to Ronco, my long puppy, who did a video a while back, and he called it, is this the worst album of the 1970s? Which is why I've called this video, my video, is this the greatest album of the 1970s? So let me just answer my own question. No, this is not the greatest album of the 1970s, in my opinion. But also, I would disagree with Ronco. I don't think it is the worst album of the 1970s either. And I was interested that that Ronco formed that judgment. His was also a very entertaining video. Go and check that out. So yeah, Alan Parsons' I, Robot. This is an album which came out in, actually earlier than I originally thought, 1976. So for those of you who don't know, Alan Parsons is a very famous engineer. You know, he worked with the Beatles, he worked with Pink Floyd and so on. He worked on Dark Side of the Moon and various, you know, really big albums. And then he formed his own sort of project, which was the Alan Parsons Project, and this is one of many records he released in the 1970s and maybe beyond. And you know, he got a kind of fan following, but he wasn't really a kind of star. The Alan Parsons Project was kind of a project rather than a band. You know, he was the producer, he was not the singer, I don't think. He did co-write some of the material, but it was a sort of recording project that he had, and he would use other musicians, other songwriters, other singers, and this is just one of the records that he made. It's a kind of meant to be a concept album about some future dystopia, you know, and the cover shot is taken at the Charles de Gaulle airport in Paris, I believe, and is it Paris, France? My geography is horrendous. And Ronco was very dismissive of both the artwork and the music. And to be honest, his video stopped me buying this album. He was very, very scathing about it indeed. He suggested it was the worst album of the 1970s. I don't think he necessarily believed that. He was kind of asking the question. So I saw it a couple of times after that in you know, charity shops, and I kept leaving it behind. I kept thinking, oh, you know, there's that album that Ronco said was crap. And then I eventually found it in a really good condition for the princely sum of £2.99. So I thought, hey, let's take a punt on it. So I bought it, I brought it home, I listened to it, I enjoyed it. I posted a picture of it on Facebook, on the Vinyl Community Facebook page. Lots of people came forward and said, love this album. Sean Slott came forward, said he loved it. A couple of other people came forward. I think one person said it was their favourite album of all time. So, interesting. Now, I kind of went back and listened to it a couple more times and I enjoyed it again. I wouldn't say I was crazy about it. I think it's, you know, it's an album of its time. It contains certain... Actually, it sounds quite good. It sounds quite sort of analogue. It's the kind of album which would have sounded horrendous in the 1980s because it was recorded in the 70s, so you get some quite nice, warm synth sounds on it, some quite interesting kind of, you know, soundscapes. And it also has some quite nice chord progressions. Now, one of the things that Ronco didn't like about the record was that he said it was the kind of album which was kind of two to a penny in the 1970s, using quite kind of middle-of-the-road kind of chord progressions, which we've all sort of heard before. You know, people like Jeff Lynne and ELO and so on, they kind of, and Alan Parsons, they sort of lifted one aspect of the Beatles' work, a very sort of melodic way with a tune and some nice chords, but nothing that was too groundbreaking. You know, the chord progressions are not groundbreaking, they're quite kind of standard, and the melodies are not devastatingly original, and the lyrics are not, you know, great, but it's just a nice sounding record, and you can put it on, you can drift off to it quite nicely. No, it's not going to shake up your world, it's not going to revolutionise the art of recording or the art of production or songwriting or anything, but it's an enjoyable mid-1970s record with a kind of sci-fi theme, some quite nice songs, some actually quite nice melodies, and some quite interesting instrumental cuts. Probably the most interesting thing about the record is the instrumental side. The songs themselves are not particularly remarkable, but some of the sound manipulation stuff on it is quite interesting. So, you know, some of the in-between stuff on the tracks is actually more interesting than these songs. So I was pleased to pick it up. You know, I'm pleased I didn't have to spend £30 on it. I mean, I wouldn't have done. I'm not an Alan Parsons fan. I would pick up more of his stuff on vinyl if I saw it at a good price. I enjoyed it enough. But what was interesting for me is that, you know, I didn't have that massive turn-off that Ronco had. He listened to it, and I think in his words he said, I didn't dig this album at all. And he spent a whole video demolishing it, which is just a great kind of video to watch. You know, videos where you have somebody who has a very strong reaction to something, either for or against, often can be quite entertaining. And what was good about his video was that he was very well mannered about it. You know, he said he was fully willing to accept that he might have got it wrong, and you know, he invited people to come forward and say, you know, do you like this album? So he was kind of dismissive of it, but only from his point of view. He wasn't trying to make a kind of generalised point. I assume the title of his video was sort of ironic, you know. Anyway, which is a very long-winded setup for Tommy's the response I had for Tommy. Now, Tommy's asking this question, you know, can we judge art? Should we judge it? How do we judge it? And this is something which I've always found very, very interesting, because I think we all do it. When, you know, if we listen to music, we instantly form judgments. Some people form what you might call snap judgments. Some people take longer to make a judgment, and it depends what you're listening to. I go down to the gym every Saturday and they play kind of chart music, and I have to turn it down. You know, I cannot stand it. I find it uncomfortable to listen to. I don't like it. I make a snap judgment about it every week. I go down there. Having said that, I like to think I don't make a complete snap judgment. I do sort of listen to it, and I do try and find something about it. You know, I try and think, well, you know, somebody has sat down and written this music. They've come up with a melody. They've come up with some words. They presumably did it for a reason. That, you know, they must have thought that there was something good about it. So let's just try and appreciate it for what it is. And I do sometimes manage to do that. I sometimes manage to find something good about it. But then I'll think, yeah, but you know, it would have been much better if they'd not done that awful part of the song, or if they'd just taken that one little bit and done something good with that. Maybe that's because I'm a musician myself, so you know, I have those kind of ears. But I do generally, with a lot of those songs, I do make snap judgments, and I think we all do that. Having said that, on the VC, it's very nice to say, but I do see a lot of videos of people who have reappraised stuff and, you know, come to like things that they didn't like originally, and I think that goes on as well. But I think we all have a kind of inbuilt checklists, really. I think different people have different kinds of checklists, and they're more or less stringent, you know, depending on the kind of listener they are. But people come to music kind of knowing what they like, and to a greater or lesser extent, I think they listen out for the things that they expect to enjoy, or which they know that they're going to like, and if that music doesn't tick those boxes, they can sometimes close off from it. You know, so you get people perhaps who kind of, you know, really they're sort of passionate about one kind of music, you know, say hip hop. So they come to a Beethoven symphony, and clearly that piece of music is not going to tick any of the hip hop boxes. So in order to appreciate that music, they're going to have to be the kind of person who isn't too strict about their mental checklist. They're going to have to try and approach that music and go, right, well, clearly I'm not going to encounter any of the things in this music that I would normally tick off in order to say, right, I enjoy this music. So I'm going to have to try and appreciate it on its own terms. And that often is the most difficult thing to do, you know, to come to a piece of music and try and appreciate it and not to compare it with anything. Often happens when, you know, a band has done a really great album, you know, like Exile on Main Street, Goat's Head Soup comes out next, and, you know, all the critics pan it, and you sort of get the feeling, well, are they panning it because they think it's not very good, or are they just panning it because it's not Exile on Main Street? You know, it doesn't tick any of the boxes that Exile on Main Street ticked, therefore it's not a worthy follow-up. Or have they not given that album a chance? Have they not tried to approach it on its own terms? And having said that, we can ask the broader question: Does music have its own inherent qualities, and does music, you know, have qualities that we might not hear on first listen, and we might want to explore that further? We might want to try and understand it in a more imaginative sense, and not be so immediately judgmental about it. My personal feeling, and I count myself just as much part of this as anybody else, but I think too much emphasis often is placed on this notion of liking, you know, music I like, music I don't like. There's a lot of stuff on the VC, you know, ranking albums. I've done it myself, you know, I like this one, I don't like that one. You know, Matt Hayes, he likes The Division Bell, I don't. I much prefer Dark Side of the Moon. We have that little debate, hey ho, you know. But there's a lot of emphasis on that, you know, don't like this album, like that one, don't like this album, like this one. And what I think is, if you try and break down what you mean by that, you actually get into some quite murky territory, as in, what do you actually mean when you say you like something? I just had to relocate, sorry, because my my battery was almost dead, so I had to plug it in. Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the interesting things for me about this is that in the West, you know, in the Western world, we have a particular idea of art and music, and that is all based around the idea of individual taste. You know, you have your taste, I have my taste. Sometimes your taste will coincide with mine. Sometimes you'll like the same thing as me, and sometimes you won't. You know, what kind of music do we like? What kind of music do we enjoy? And often we don't think too closely about our reasons for that. But in other cultures and in other times, music was not seen in that way. Music was often treated as something that had a use. If you go back to kind of Indian music, you know, these kind of ragas, nobody ever particularly stopped to think, well, is this a good raga or is it a bad raga? If it was an afternoon raga, the question would be more, well, does this raga fulfill its usefulness? Is it useful? Is it what is required at this point? You know, for example, an Indian raga, which is meant to be listened to on a Tuesday morning, and it's too upbeat, you know. So the Indian listeners wouldn't slag that off for being a bad raga as such. It would just be, well, it's not an appropriate raga. That raga is not fulfilling its role. But the problem that we have is that we, you know, in our culture, it's very, very splintered off, and we're all, you know, we all just exist in our little worlds, and we all have our kind of tastes. So when somebody like Ronco comes to this album, maybe what he means when he says he doesn't like it or he doesn't dig it is that he finds no use for it. You know, the music which he finds a use for, and I know that because we've conversed about it, is music which he feels takes him somewhere new and unfamiliar, where he's going to hear new and strange chord progressions, or where he's going to hear a particular arrangement of ideas which he's never quite heard before. You know, he likes to be taken into new areas that he doesn't know, whereas other people are completely opposite. They like to hear music which confirms what they already know and what they already enjoy. So, you know, you'll get people who sort of like heavy metal music, and when they listen to music they want to hear the heavy metal sound, and if they don't hear that, then that music has no use for them. It doesn't fulfill any use. They can't make any use of it. And what makes the issue so complicated is that we all have different uses for music, and that kind of varies for each of us as we go through the day. You know, Tommy mentioned the album Press to Play by Paul McCartney, which is, you know, not a very popular McCartney album and is often seen as bad. Now, if I was to go for a walk on a summer's afternoon and I wanted to be taken on an emotional journey of some kind, I would not pick that album, because the music on that album would be no use to me in that situation. If I wanted to have a kind of, if I wanted to get in touch with myself and think back through some, you know, personal experiences and you know, try and connect to some kind of emotional things that have been happening, I just wouldn't pick that album. There's other albums I would choose. But on a different day, I might just want to turn my mind off, not think too carefully about anything, just have something in my headphones that's going to keep me company, that's not going to make any demands of me. It's just going to keep me company on the walk, and I can listen to it and I can kind of switch my brain off and not worry about anything. It's just there in my headphones, you know. So then I, you know, I might choose Press to Play. People will vary according to their thresholds of what they will accept and what they will not accept. So you'll get somebody who only likes, say, you know, symphonic music written in the 19th century. Any other kind of music, it doesn't matter how good it is, how bad it is, if that doesn't fulfil their needs or their expectations, then they won't find any use for it. If I don't find something useful for me straight away, then maybe I will do further down the line and just try to be open. But, you know, we all have different thresholds, and I am definitely closed off to certain kinds of bands and music. You know, we all have our pet hates and we all have our reasons for not liking things, and often those reasons can be nothing to do with the music. You know, they can be to do with completely other things. You know, personal associations. You know, there are people who won't listen to music, certain kinds of music, just because their dad liked it, and perhaps they didn't get on with their dad. Therefore, they don't listen to that music. It's a very, very complicated area, and yeah, I feel like I've scratched the surface of things without maybe getting too deeply into them, but I don't want to bore you, so I'm going to leave it there. So yeah, is this the greatest album of the 1970s? No. Is it the worst album of the 1970s? No, I don't think so either. But the way that we might go about trying to judge it and make sense of it and trying to work out whether it is actually any good or not, I think that's quite a complicated subject. Okay, VC, hope you enjoyed that. See you soon. Bye-bye.